Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good morning. Good to see you today.
How are you, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
Ready and raring to solve all the problems.
One at a
and
time.
Pretend everything is okay. No, I don't pretend anything, but I try desperately to not make people despondent, because I don't consider most of the problems we face, whether they're monetary problems or civil liberty problems, they're difficult problems, but the answers aren't difficult.
Yeah.
You know, if a people decided they wanted to solve these problems, they know how to do it. Foreign policy, of course. We could have less war and more peace if we followed a policy, and it costs us a lot less money.
Yeah.
So we will, though, talk about the persistence of a deeply flawed foreign policy, which is strongly supported by both political parties. And that has to do with Syria. And, you know, there's been a war of sorts going on over there. It's been worse and it's been better. But right now, we have to admit, we're still there. We're still there fighting Obama's war. You know, they have to get rid of Assad. Oh, we rejected that. Sorta.
Yeah.
But I still think that, you know, our presence there and our working with some of the Kurds, the goal is to get rid of Assad. And this weekend there was a little skirmish. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, a little skirmish broke out, which in the scheme of things, no big deal. You know, we have a military helicopter go in and we bomb a checkpoint, which was operated by a legitimate government of Syria, and somebody gets killed. But there was not a big battle, not a lot of major deaths, but there was a contention there, and we're there for a specific reason. It was in the region where there just might be a little bit of oil.
Yeah.
And we have declared, you know, not victory in Syria, and Assad did not have to go, but we declared we'd just take the oil. And that sort of would rub the people the wrong way, the Syrian people and the Syrian government, Assad, and lo and behold, they are pretty annoyed. And one statement they made on this little skirmish of us trying to get through this checkpoint was, don't you know we're a sovereign nation and you are illegally occupying our country? So that's their official position, but that is not our position. Our position is, for pragmatic reasons, I guess, that we have to control the oil. But there are other factors as well. Israel is very much involved in this region and this country. So we're there for very specific reasons. But I wanted to bring that up because it was an incident, and it hasn't been in the news much, but it's still there. There's still potential danger, and it's a result of and a reflection of a foreign policy of interventionism, which we find is strongly endorsed by Democrats and Republicans, and yet there are some people in this country who still believe that the best approach would be a non-interventionist foreign policy, and trading and talking with people and not pretending that we are the authorities and that sovereignty of other nations means nothing, and that we can willy-nilly go and decide whose oil it is and what will happen, and then yell and scream that we're only doing this in self-defense. Like, I think even in this incident, they shot first. Yeah, they shot first after we're trying to push through their checkpoints. So anyway, this is a problem that's been around, and if you want to find out who really started it, it was Obama. But it has been endorsed by, you know, hawkish Republicans, and it's been there, and it remains a danger. So when we talk about removing troops, it doesn't really happen. You know, we always encourage our side to remove troops and move them around, but most of the time those are tactical moves, and then they are expressed as we're really changing policy. But the policy remains a change, and tactical changes in positioning of troops is not the answer to our problems.
Yeah, you're stepping back to what the origin of this is, so we get the sort of the bigger context. You know, Hillary, Obama, and a guy called Biden, we've heard of him, right? This is their policy. Right after Hillary had her wonderful success liberating Libya and turning it into the Switzerland of Africa, right? Remember that? Right after that wonderful victory, she had another brainy idea. She decided to and actually Senator Paul talked about this once in a hearing. She decided it would be a wonderful idea to take all those weapons from the Al-Qaeda rebels in Libya and ship them off to Al-Qaeda in Syria to overthrow the Syrian government, because the Libya thing went so well, right? So this is Hillary's foreign policy under both Obama and Biden to arm jihadists, to overthrow the government. It wasn't successful. Syria asked for Russia's help, which forestalled an ISIS Al-Qaeda victory. But unfortunately, Trump has maintained the same policy. He just sprinkled a little bit more different flavoring on it. With Obama and Hillary, it was for the people. For Trump, it's, hey, we want your oil, we're going to take it. But the policy remains the same. And that's what's really disgusting and sick about the whole thing. But this particular skirmish, just a little bit of a timeline, it happened yesterday in Syria, around Hasaka. The U.S. approached the Syrian government checkpoint. The Syrian government said you can't come in because they legitimately view the U.S. as a foreign occupier. You know, it's not there legally. There's no question about it. So they were denied entry. The U.S. started shooting at their legs. The Syrians returned fire. So the U.S. called in a helicopter strike, which destroyed the outpost and killed one of the Syrian government soldiers. So after that, dozens of locals came and they went to the checkpoint and they said, you know, we'll protect it. So my question, I looked at a lot of the pictures of the locals coming in. What do you think these locals think about Americans in their country now? Do you think they would kill them at any second? So this is also Trump putting soldiers literally in harm's way for no benefit to American national security, no benefit to any of us, likely to be killed by legitimately furious people who've just had a relative or a friend or someone killed. And this is for nothing except for an oil deal, which we'll talk about later.
Right, and there was a movement and a talk about advancing protecting our oil there. So there was a contract made with a good old-fashioned American capitalist corporation. You know, the crony deep state people were involved, and they're trying to go in there and fortify and build up and improve those oil fields. And that meant that this was getting out of hand. And I think this prompted the Syrians to crack down more, but it also means that we were stretching it too to go through these checkpoints. Evidently they've gone through before. But so the continuation of solidifying our support and our sovereignty over the oil is something that the Syrians aren't going to allow that to happen, nor will the Syrian, if it gets really out of hand, the Syrian allies aren't going to let it happen either. There's more than just Assad. Yeah. Matter of fact, Assad didn't have much of a military victory by himself. He needed some help, and he's going to get help. You know, if there's a lot more of this going on, and we become too aggressive with declaring our national security is necessary for us to protect this oil. It's amazing that people accept this, but it's not amazing that you hear nothing about this and some danger of this, because both parties tend to agree with this position. At the same time, it's really easy to demagogue the coronavirus, fiasco. That's easy. You can politicize that and blame whoever, and this just goes on. But I think there's some stirrings there, but hopefully it settles down. Wish we'd have a different foreign policy, but it could be one of those situations that could, break out and be much worse.
Here's an example of how propaganda works, and it works so strong in the U.S. Americans are the most propagandized people in the world. And I'll start it with one of our favorite stories, and you'll remember it well. We've told it many times, is when you were in a committee hearing and you said, well, the Iraqis have never attacked us. Dr. Paul, I'm sorry, you're wrong. They were shooting at us as we were bombing them in our airplanes. And let's look at this first clip, because this is that exact thing. This is the American news. The U.S. troops are illegally in Syria. They shot Syrian government forces. And here's how the U.S. media, this is Fox, portrays it. U.S. troops attacked in eastern Syria. It just shows how heavily propagandized the whole thing. But once again, U.S. troops put in harm's way, not for our national defense, but to make money for a crony capitalist, cronyist company. And this is what happened. Earlier this month, a deal was signed by the U.S. government, not with the Syrian government, legitimate government, no, with a crony political company called Delta Crescent Energy, which is headed by George W. Bush's former ambassador to Denmark. Multi-billion-dollar deal. They're going to go in there in the Kurdish areas, and they're going to modernize the oil fields, and they're going to sell all that oil. The Kurds stand to make billions of dollars, but the contract explicitly states not a penny to Assad. He can't have anything. And so this is what Pau Politico writes it. This effort is meant to punish the Assad regime for the atrocities committed in the country's civil war. And as you point out, and we've talked about on the show many times, the gassing has since been proven fake. The OPCW report was totally falsified because whistleblowers have come forth. We know that. This is what CNN says. The aim of the deal is to starve the Assad regime and give U.S. officials a way to keep making the case to keep troops in Syria. Because otherwise, why are we there? Well, we got to protect this deal.
But you can imagine what would happen if we did back off and became less aggressive and didn't declare it was our oil. They say, "Oh, you've sold out to Russia. You're selling out to the Chinese and the Iranians, the whole work." Instead of, they might do that. They might be friends, which they try to be friends, with Assad, and friendship and trade is another way. If we really needed the oil, of course, we've been told that we're oil independent, we're totally energy independent now. So why are we risking all this? But it's a matter. There's no doubt. There's a matter of profiteering on this, and I've always complained about this because this is the part of our system which is labeled free enterprise and American system of economics, and they see how rotten it is.
Yeah.
At the same time, what we have worked so hard, and a certain group of economists by the name of the Austrian economists have been working for decades, and the ideas have been around for a lot longer than that, promoting market economy, market prices, voluntary contracts, and no fraud, no theft, and all these things. This is they suffer the same consequence. So those of us who promote that say, see what happens, look at what they do. At the same time, that has to be the answer. We see so many tragedies of it. Just think of the heartache that we have caused in a neighbor, Cuba, by us, putting all these sanctions on the innocent people in Cuba. The communist leaders never suffered, but the people suffered, and of course we still don't have a better situation there. So they just chose to say that we have to use authoritarian approaches, we have to be dictators, we have to declare sovereignty, we'll center it by force, and yet a completely different viewpoint can be that countries can and have over the many centuries gotten along through trade. As a matter of fact, if there's been any period of time of reasonable peace, it was usually done with a sound currency and a lot of trade. And yet we don't have a sound currency. And right now we do more of this and then say, well, they're going to steal our products. We have to put on sanctions, and we are the powerhouse, so we're going to put penalties on them and control their finances. So no, the two things are completely different. And for them to come back now and say, well, this is all because those on the other side, those who promote the authoritarian approach of Marxism and all kinds of socialism, saying, see, what you guys are talking about doesn't work. Well, anytime we've had a hint of it, which we did in the early part of our history, things did rather well. Economic growth was fantastic compared to what's happening now, because we're under threat, not only because our authority overseas is shrinking, the economic power that we've had and the power of the dollar, the reserve currency, that's changing also.
That's changing for sure. Well, let's look at this next clip, more about this deal. And I know this is going to shock you, Dr. Paul. This is from CNN. Former Army Delta Force officer, U.S. ambassador, signs secretive contract to develop Syrian oil fields. It's secret. And if you dig down to some of this, this has been going on, the negotiations have been going on for a year. The Pentagon and State Department have not been that awfully keen because it seems pretty nasty. But not surprisingly, guess who's the guy pushing this thing forward? Mike Pompeo, pushing this deal. He's not ashamed at all. And it only came out when Pompeo was asked by Lindsey Graham about something, and he spilled the beans on this deal. And we tried to give Trump a pat on the back when he does the right thing. But how can he keep people like Pompeo in power? You can only conclude that by his silence there's sort of agreement with what Pompeo does. But this is blatantly stealing the oil of another country, blatantly stealing resources. And you know, the administration screams bloody murder about the Chinese stealing our intellectual property rights. There might be something to it, we don't know. But this is very, very obviously, and Trump even admits it, he's caught red-handed. Yeah, I'm stealing their oil, you know, and it's completely out there. This is Pompeo's job. This is what Pompeo's doing. And if the president disagrees, then he needs to do something about it.
You know, it also gets annoying when you think Russia, those dirty old communists, and Chinese communists, yes, they still have a lot of communist, socialistic ideas, but they also know how to handle international trade a little bit better. They've made a lot of money selling us stuff. They didn't steal the money. Americans bought their stuff, and especially China. They're very, very wealthy, and they've done a lot of investing, which is much closer to the marketplace than what we're doing in Syria. You know, they especially the Chinese have invested a lot of money in Africa, and yet we have a lot of military in Africa. We're in competition with them, but ours is the military approach. Ours is this kind of stuff that we're talking about now with Syria, where it's almost unbelievable. But so I'm sure there's some people listening to us today that think that we're off base because the Chinese couldn't be offering anything from a policy standpoint, and yet we're not saying they're good free market people, but they've been able to do sometimes things with a voluntary contract and investment of money that they earned from us by us spending money there. You know, they didn't come and steal the money from us, but the answer obviously is not the military approach to any of this. I think promoting free and honest trade is a powerful weapon.
Unfortunately, we kind of have an Antifa BLM foreign policy. We beat you up and we steal your stuff, you know, and that's not the way to conduct business overseas. But I don't know if you're ready to move on, but I had a couple of things I wanted to share with you, Dr. Paul, that I was looking at. And I'm really wondering if something is in the water down under, maybe some hallucinogenic drugs. Something is going on because New Zealand and Australia have lost their minds. In New Zealand, as we talked about a few days ago, they've been completely isolated for 102 days, right? And the incubation period for coronavirus is 4 days. So somehow, Rona pops up somewhere in one family, 4 people, nobody as far as we know hospitalized or even sick, just 4 people test positive, and the Prime Minister goes completely nuts and closes the entire country down. Not only does she do that, she cancels the elections. Forget it. And here she is. This woman is insane. But look at how she's regarded in the Western media. She cancels elections. She appears magnanimous and conciliatory by canceling the elections. Can you imagine if someone like Belarus or wherever, or even Putin canceled, or even when Trump was suggesting we delay the elections? That monster, he's worse than Hitler. But here you have this crazed woman, and it gets even worse. Australia, which has we talked about a case-demic, not a pandemic, because hardly anyone has died there. Let's look at this next clip. This is chilling because this is coming to a neighborhood near you. Police are preparing to launch their aerial arsenal as part of a crackdown on COVID rule breakers. High-powered drones will be used to find people not wearing masks and cars too far from home.
Yeah, we know what they're up to. I mean, they're looking for political power and authoritarianism, and they are hateful with the system that we once had, whether we were free or market. But how do they achieve this in order to get the people to go along a little bit? And you pointed out, it's the data. Yeah. Where does this data come from? It's all a hoax. You know, and yet they'll do these horrendous things to us. But that happens here. I bet we've spent half our time trying to get the information out that what you read is just flat out not true.
Yeah.
And because it's a challenge to us, because then say, oh, you don't care about people who are sick. Well, now we're getting a lot of support, including from Robert Kennedy, that more people are dying from lockdowns than they are from the virus. So this is something. It's once again, it's the media and the way it's distorted. But it seems like it's both sides. Whose lies are the biggest, and which ones are we going to believe? I would say that most of the time it's motivated by hate, especially from one side. It's more hate than anything else. And the other side, I think sometimes it comes from ignorance and lack of principles for defending what freedom is all about.
Yeah.
And they go along with it, and they end up all being interventionists, and some use more force than others. And then you end up with no problem with the transition from Obama to the Republican administration in Syria. And various other places, the Middle East, the entire Middle East. No, we don't have Iraq, and we have less in Afghanistan, but we're still there, and there's still a potential danger. So they don't change on principle, that they try to change the image, and someday we'd like to change the policies.
Yeah, that would be good. Here's another. I have another couple of quick ones, and then if you want to say something, then I'll close after that. But this is just again on the coronavirus. Here is an expert. This is just July 2nd. The truth is simple and horrifying. We are about to have dozens of New York cities around the country. The next 8 weeks are going to be brutal, no matter what we do. ICUs overflowing, ventilators rationed, hundreds of thousands of deaths. That's just over a month ago. Let's look at today's U.S. deaths. Coronavirus, down, down, down. The peak is passed, even with cooking the books. But this is what the effect of that, Dr. Paul, as you know, is to get people to give up their freedoms, to give up their liberties. Hundreds of thousands of deaths. I'll put on 2 masks. I'll put on 4 sets of goggles. I'll plug my ears. I'll put on a wetsuit. And then when it doesn't happen, they say, well, see, that's because you had your 2 sets of goggles on. If you'd only had 1 set, there would have been 100,000 deaths.
Right.
So
it's just a devastating problem, and to overcome that, all I can think of is let's get the information the best we can, and that's related, and I hope people pay attention to it.
Yeah.
I have one that I'd like to mention, and that is something that just came up recently. The headline here is Unz's review.
Yeah, Ron Unz.
He says,
good guy.
Doctors support Black Lives Matter by wearing black scrub clothes. That's going to solve our problems. And of course, he's not supportive of that. He was pointing this out. But, to me, the whole thing, and their justification is that the only people who are suffering from, being cheated out of adequate medical care are black people. Well, there's lots of pros and cons on how to distribute medical care. We've been distributing medical care in a wholesale manner since the 1960s, and there's been more discrimination than ever, because the rich get rich and the poor get poor and all. But the whole point of these doctors that are doing that's really, I take that personally.
Yeah.
The doctors that are doing this is saying that it's only blacks that suffer. They do. They have problems. But if you're an Asian American or Hispanic American or other minority, it doesn't even count, or an Indian American, it doesn't matter. But they're out in front, and it's almost like we are now dedicated. We can't just practice medicine in our little shop. We have to be out in front on this crisis that has come. And then they say, if we change the color of our suits, and somebody's already pointed out that white is there for a purpose. It has some health benefits from wearing white rather than black, for spotting soiled clothes and things like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, but the doctors have been very discouraging, except for a few who have established, like Keith Smith. I think it's Keith Smith up in Oklahoma City, totally private, and they're doing quite well. But the doctors, just think about the reports that they fudge. They go along. I just wonder if these doctors who want to wear black were willing to change the death certificate and say, oh yeah, they died from it. It was always
COVID all
the
the time.
Coronavirus, and also just to change it. They were probably hospital doctors, and the hospital put a lot of pressure on them to always put the diagnosis down. Even if it wasn't on the death certificate, you got to put it down. And that's why, it's another reason why those stats are so out of whack. The death stats, everything else. If somebody dies in a nursing home and they're 94 and they had pneumonia, and then, he's positive.
Yeah.
then that's
Another
part of that
COVID.
statistic that's always fudged. But I think I'm disappointed when I run into these doctors that seem to participate in things that are making things much worse, because the doctors types are participating in terrorizing the people because they have credibility.
Yeah.
Dr. Fauci,
Yeah.
I mean, he said so, and he had a big position here, and it's barely getting changed now with Dr. Alice coming on CDC. He might change his attitude. Hopefully that will happen. But this whole thing that these doctors who are saying, yes, we're going to contribute to the solution to this problem and the discrimination that minorities get in medical care, and we're going to wear black scrub clothes and solve our problems. To say the least, I disagree with them.
Yeah, it's insane. Well, Dr. Paul, I'm going to close. The kids are going back to school this week, next week, pretty soon. Our friend Tom Woods, asked us to remind you all of the Ron Paul homeschool curriculum, which is a great way. We use it. K through 12, self-taught curriculum, ronpaulhomeschool.com. Save parents a lot of time. Trust me, it saves a lot of time. But it's also so interesting, you're going to want to watch some of it too. If you click this link, Tom's going to save you $160 to get involved in the Ron Paul homeschool. This is a great opportunity to raise kids that really know values and are really smart kids.
Very good. And Tom has personally designed and participated in making these study groups, and he's fantastic, and the students really like him, especially on the history. He's really good, so hopefully some people will look into it. But I do want to once again acknowledge our viewers for being with us and giving us support, and thank them for coming back, and hopefully you will help get new people to come and visit our website and visit our program, because things have been going well, but the country is still in needs of more voices, and eventually it's voices. It isn't like it's an unbearable task and an impossible task. We don't have to wait until we get 52% of the people now agree with it. It doesn't work that way. Even the bad guys don't get that. It's all getting the people in the right places right now. What percentage of the people are giving out all this propaganda over coronavirus and lockdowns and why we have a slump and never talk about the Federal Reserve? It all has to do with leadership, which I say that with qualification. Those who get to make the noise and propagandize are the ones who put this out, and that's in the media and the government and the colleges and everything else. That has to change. I am totally convinced over many years at looking at this that politicians aren't worth very much. There are some very good ones there because people listen to them and they have a message, but that's the only thing that counts. And ultimately, it is trying to get people to understand economics and history. That's why I, actually, got the Ron Paul curriculum started, because you have to change ideas and counteract what's coming out of our universities. And just think of all the nonsense going on in the last just 6 months. Look at what they've accomplished. They've destroyed any notion that we should be talking about freedom and liberty and limited government and all these things. It's just unbelievable how powerful, influential they were in able to change things to happen. Who would ever thought we'd get to the point where the doctors are participating? Well, I have to help out. I think we all should wear, black scrub suits. I mean, there's a lot of people there in the right position. What I'm anxious to do is get people interested in studying the subject of what personal liberty is all about, and then invent something yourself on a method of spreading the message. Because sometimes I get asked, what should I do? What should I do? I said, well, do what you're best at. And there's a lot of people out there that have done things on their own, and they've spread this message. So that is my goal, spreading the message of liberty. I believe that is the answer to just about all our problems. I want to thank you for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.